random battles in my Zelda, it's more likely than you think. Hello and welcome to yet another Geek Show Spotlight. This time we are covering Zelda II, The Adventure of Link for the NES. I'm your host, Josh Keir.
I'm your host, Dalton Munnell.
I'm your host, Alex Ecker.
So
that was pretty good. I like that, Josh.
That was pretty funny.
Here we are on Zelda 2.
Okay, so guys, I first played the original Legend of Zelda a year or two ago, and I did not continue with the franchise because I wanted to play them all in order, and I started this one immediately after, and I quit after like 15 minutes. I just really hated it, and then I've dreaded getting back to the series ever since. And I don't know what happened, but I actually really liked this game. So I think me from the past was wrong. I was really happy with this.
I was dreading this too. I really had no idea kind of how I was ever going to get through it. Zelda is I think I said in the Zelda 1 Spotlight, Zelda is my favorite series of all time, and Zelda 2 was the only game in that franchise that I hadn't completed all the way through. It's just so wildly different, and I honestly wasn't sure if that was going to change as a result of preparing for this show. I guess it technically hasn't yet. I am on the last dungeon, but I plan on finishing it, and I never even thought I'd make it that far.
Yeah, I didn't even really have a hard time forcing myself through it. I was legitimately enjoying it, although I can see from what I know of the franchise how this is wildly different, and I can see why this is so divisive.
Yeah,
because I don't think there is a lot to criticize, but when it's a beloved franchise like this, and this one game, this one odd man out is just so different, it's not what you're looking for. I mean, I get it. That said, let's get on to, hey, do we want to start with positives or negatives here? I guess let's start with why it's different.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good place as any. So whereas every other Zelda game is some version of either top-down or, three-dimensional once we've progressed onto that plane, an exploration / dungeon delving adventure game. The Adventure of Link is a cross-up between an overworld RPG, kind of like Dragon Quest or something like that, where you're traversing the overworld and going to towns and talking to people, mashed up with a side-scrolling action game when in the fights and dungeons and even in the towns, where, as with other games in the Zelda franchise, Link has multiple axes of movement, up, down, left, and right. You are side-scrolling like your Super Mario. You can go left and right and jump, and that's it. Combat, ironically enough, is, I think, the deeper in this game than it is in most other Zelda games in the franchise, to this day. Considering that you start with one move, the stab, which you can stab high or low, and
classic. You
can guard high or low. Your Link is always just passively guarding with his shield, and whatever angle, whatever axis you're standing on, you will block or deflect certain attacks that come at you high or low. And enemies will do the same. So combat becomes this pretty methodical dance of trying to repel the enemy's attacks while also attacking on the angle that they aren't guarding. And eventually that'll evolve to get where Link gets his trademark downward stab attack from Super Smash Brothers, which the first time I played this game, I was surprised to find out that Smash didn't just make up that move, and it actually did have history in the Zelda franchise. Did anyone else know that before playing this game?
Well,
I didn't know that.
Not even just that. It's the same with the upstab move.
Right. I didn't get to the upstab yet, but that also debuts in Zelda 2.
Yeah, and that downstab feels real good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it really does.
That said, I really like the combat in this game, and I'm going to say on that grounds, not every grounds, but on this ground, I think this exceeds over the first game, despite being so wildly different, because I had issues with the combat in the previous game, where I didn't like the way that I could be like 2 pixels off from where I need to be to accurately hit someone. And I don't know, something felt finicky and not right to me. And the combat feels really good in this game. That said, the difficulty of the combat is off the rails and not better here.
Oh, no, this game's hard as balls.
Yeah, it's like, to me, it's a set of mechanics that feels better, but the level design, the enemy design makes it worse anyway. And so I don't know which game to say I prefer, like, the combat gameplay of.
I think that the combat overall in Zelda 2 is better than the first, and if the game had been just tweaked a little bit more to be a little less punishing, then this game would not be looked at as negatively as it is.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous over the top hard. And it's funny because I don't remember if we were on air or not, but I mentioned that I was they call them temples now instead of dungeons, that I was 2 temples in and that the game wasn't all that hard and I wasn't cheating at all and everything was just fine. And you said, oh, it will get hard. And you know what? On the 3rd temple, it got pretty damn impossible.
Third temple, when they start throwing the blue armored knights at you that constantly shoot daggers at you while running away when you try to approach them.
I believe so. Yeah.
That enemy was the catalyst for probably over half of my rage at this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just felt like I get that the combat is about recognizing their tells and just having really good timing. And you know what? It actually feels strangely like playing Sekiro. But I didn't feel like the tells were like good enough. I felt like I was guessing all the time whether I should be holding down or not and whether I should be attacking or letting them guard. And I just felt like I could never get it right, especially with enemies like that one that are like moving a lot while you're doing it.
It's pretty telling, I think, that for at the very least for the armored knights, the orange and red ones, and really the blue ones, the optimal strategy for fighting them isn't actually like do the dance that I think they want you to do, which is reading their tells and blocking and then counter stabbing. It's actually just to kind of jump at them and time your slash when you're falling down, so you get them in the head, even though they're blocking up, and the recoil from your attack pushes them back far enough that their counterattack doesn't hit you.
Yeah, I did notice that. See, I didn't get through much of the game just because I was doing a lot of different things outside of the podcast and the spotlights. But when I was watching gameplay footage of it, I did notice there was a lot of jumping and slashing and them bouncing back, and that's how they would get through enemies kind of quick.
It's really the only way to make it bearable. I honestly don't know how anybody beat this game without the use of save states back when it came out, because not only is it just is it just like brutally difficult, but it's really unforgiving in the way that there is next to no way to recover any resources that you've lost. There's not a single way to recover health outside of randomly finding a fairy or the heal spell that you get in like the second major area of the game. But enemies will never drop health pickups. They'll occasionally drop tiny magic refills, but the healing spell takes up over half of your magic bar for a grand majority of the game. So you'll maybe be able to do that once on a full life.
Right.
I feel like this is actually harder than any of the Mega Man games we played.
I was planning on coming in here and saying that Zelda 2, I think, was harder than Mega Man 1 through 6 put together.
Yeah.
Wow.
Whereas, and you know, the difficulty in the Mega Man games, I always felt like it was still rewarding to rise to the challenges and overcome them. But when Zelda 2 gets too hard, there were segments where I finally got past them and thought, well, that was complete bullshit. I'm glad I don't have to do that again.
Yeah, well, that's partly true. Something we haven't touched base on is in Zelda 1, when you lost all your life, it would leave you out the nearest dungeon or at the starting point, correct?
Right, and I remember my major gripe with the game back then was that when you die, they start you at the start of the dungeon with only 3 hearts. Well, I'd have liked that a whole lot more in this game compared to what you get.
Yep. Yeah, which is a life system. You get 3 lives, and that's it. After you die in all 3 of those lives, you were started all the way back at the beginning scene where you're watching a very sleepy Zelda.
Yeah, I'm going to call that a bad move.
Oh,
yeah, because you could be all the way through the entire map and have to go and die and then start right back at the beginning of the world. If I'm not mistaken, you still keep shit, but it's so annoying that you have to trek all the way back to where you were. Especially if you don't know this game very well and you get lost really easy in its environment just because the environment's kind of droney in this one. There's nothing very pretty about it except inside the battle stuff. Some of it looks really good. Some of it looks not so good, you know?
Well, I guess since you commented on looks and we've been kind of addressing criticisms here mostly, I have to say visually completely unappealing. The graphics are not good.
Yeah.
And I thought the visuals in the first Zelda held up really well, and it's not a problem at all to play that today, but I think the graphics are pretty bad here, particularly in the overworld.
Oh, the overworld is pretty awful, yeah.
Yeah, you have to play the Wizard of Oz about it and follow the yellow brick road the entire time.
Yeah, well, that said, the graphics aside, I actually really like the overworld system and the jumping between that and the side-scrolling sections. I don't think I've played another game like that, but I mean, plenty of games already at this point in time have the idea of an overworld, and then, you know, you walk over to a building that you're the size of and you walk into it and all of a sudden, oh, it's actually a town. And then we start drawing everything at more accurate sizes and whatnot. But I liked the way that it wasn't just towns here. It was crossing bridges and just random places in the fields and whatnot. It made it feel like the world map is just kind of shortening like an adventure that you know you're actually having anyway. Like when you're going from one town to another, it's like, yeah, that could be 20 seconds on the world map, but hey, look at this. You actually traversed dangerous areas and fought enemies on the way there. And, you know, I just felt like it was a really immersive move, actually, more so than if the combat happened on the world map. It was more immersive that, you know, the bridge that's one square on a world map, you step on it and then all of a sudden, no, you're actually going to fight your way across this bridge.
Not to cut you off there, but the other thing that was really nice too is, you know, the random enemy encounters. If you were in the foresty, bushy looking sections, the terrain around you when it would jump you into those 2D side-scrolling battles changed too. Like it wasn't just one environment for every fight.
Right. It was custom to where you were all the time.
Right. Absolutely. I did like that there were random spots that you could find that would take you to different things, like the bridge, for example, or you walk into a particular part of a forest grid and you were in like a fairy area, or you would find a treasure or hidden hearts. The only thing I don't like about that is that they're not obvious, kind of like how Zelda 1 was.
Yeah, there are hidden spots in the grass that weren't terribly obvious, or maybe there was a hint and I missed them.
Right. Generally, I find for most of those occurrences in the game, they are either like squares with a fairy or a red potion on them, or something else that, while nice to find, isn't like necessary for progress, so it's not a big deal if you don't find them. But I remember one grievous example towards the end of the game is that there is, I think, before you get into the second to last dungeon, there is a town you have to find. You'll go to this town on the map, and that town is evacuated, and you find the town sage in his sanctuary, and he tells you that they had to abandon the town, and he gives you this hint that the town is in the woods to the east. And you go to that area on the world map, and there you have to go through a cave, and it spits you out in this area where there are woods, and, you know, ostensibly the town is in there. Well, the only way to actually find the town is to, one, realize that you can do this thing that I did not know you could do until this point in the game. You find a hammer earlier on in the game, and when you get the hammer, you have the ability to press A to demolish rocks on the world map. Well, apparently you also have the ability to demolish forest tiles, which I had never done before because there was never any reason to or indication that you could do it at all. But the only way to find
because
this
why would you
other
guess
town
that?
is to actually use the hammer to demolish the forest tile, the exact forest tile that the town is hiding on. If you walk over it while it's forest, you won't find the town. And the game, I was not able to find any hint as to that was the course of action you were supposed to take. So while I was okay with the game hiding things on the world map generally, that part was total crap, and I would never have gotten past that without a walkthrough.
Yeah, so there are a few egregious examples like that, but for the most part, I actually found this game a lot less obtuse than the first one. I found most of the time the hints to be a lot more useful, and I actually managed my way through most of the game without a guide. I would just, if I couldn't figure it out for 10 minutes, go ahead and look it up, but I felt like I could figure out most of it without the help.
Yeah, after the first couple dungeons, you get a feel for the general flow of like find your new town, figure out what you need to do to get the spell in that town, which usually involves searching the immediate area around you for one collectible item and then coming back and talking to the person that comes out of the house, and then you can use that spell to get past the next environmental obstacle blocking you from getting to the next dungeon, and then you find the hidden item in the dungeon that lets you get into the next area of the overworld. After the second or third temple, that whole gameplay loop becomes pretty obvious, and I actually think they do a really good job of kind of getting you into that loop and guiding you through the world without a whole lot of guidance. There will be you'll generally find townspeople that'll give you vague, poorly translated hints of what you're supposed to do, and even where the heart or magic containers are if you're really meticulous in talking to everybody. And just generally, I think the game does a pretty good job of pointing you in the right direction while not telling you exactly what to do, except for
while not marking a point on a map for you.
Where you just have to go tear down the entire forest with your hammer.
Yeah, so in that way, I think that's an area where it beats the first game. Also inside the towns, I just really like what they did with the people in the towns, where for this era of gaming, they made the towns feel alive. There's more actual NPCs than the first games. I like the way that they're all actively invested in your quest. They all know who you are.
Right, yeah.
I don't know if I've really seen that before, where you walk around and just everyone in a town is like, oh, hey, hero, did you know about this thing? I just thought you should know this. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I do like how the interactions are there, but maybe this is just a stupid nitpick of mine where I was playing the beefed up version of it on the Switch's Prime membership thing, and every time I talked to an NPC, it felt like it took way too long for the text to move along.
Okay, yeah, it did.
Oh, yeah,
and
the text goes by at a snail's pace.
Good. I'm so glad I'm not the only one who thought that.
Yeah, well, and in most games with text, you can hit A or B to make the text jump to the end, but if you did it here, it cut off the text.
Yeah, that was really infuriating.
You know, the thought just dawned on me right now, but you were mentioning how, most of the people that you talk to in the towns are actively invested in Link as the hero and the quest to save Hyrule. But it's probably because as Zelda 2 is a direct sequel to the first game, Link is
and
probably
the only one
already pretty damn famous in Hyrule just by virtue of having saved the kingdom once already. So it actually makes a lot of sense that everybody knows who you are and is like, hey, save us again, boyo.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm used to RPGs just ignoring the fact that you're a hero, not necessarily in a sequel always, but in terms of, well, I've half saved the world already and you guys still don't know who I am.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if that is a little bit of continuity they added there, because this is a direct sequel. And the backstory
What is
of the
interesting
game is that
Yeah.
Ganon's minions are trying to harvest
I was just about to
Link's
touch on
blood
that.
to revive him. So I wish they had kind of touched on that in the game itself, but I always thought that was pretty metal.
Well, the Zelda that you're trying to save isn't the Zelda from the first game.
Right.
True. And I don't remember if I don't think the game ever actually made that clear to me. I just saw that elsewhere.
No, as it is with most games from the late 80s, the entirety of the story is contained in the first couple pages of the instruction manual and not in the game.
Right.
Right. Of course.
Yeah, I'm reading up the plot of the game right now. Yeah, basically there's a curse on anyone who's named Zelda after the events of the first game, and they all go to sleep. It's weird. I'm just very, very quickly paraphrasing it. But yeah, there was a spell placed by a wizard, and he decreed that princesses born to the royal family from that point on would be named Zelda in remembrance of whatever tragedy, and they would all be put to sleep. It's weird. I don't know. Go read it yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, you've pretty much covered it there.
Yeah.
That seems pretty right on for the era.
And then he gets a magic tattoo on his left hand, and
Man, I can't wait to see, like, having only played 1 and 2 and started Breath of the Wild, I cannot wait to see the timeline of this go utterly bonkers. I've seen that official timeline, and I've seen that a lot of people don't actually believe it, and they're like, no, you like reverse engineered that. You didn't intend for all this continuity to begin with. You're making this up as you go along. And I kind of want to see, as we keep playing these, if I can figure out the timeline approximately without looking it up.
oh, okay.
Just so I can appreciate how ridiculous that was up until they finally put out an official one.
You know, Dalton, I'm actually kind of really excited to see you get to Ocarina of Time now, because this is not something that I nor many people probably knew the first time they played through Ocarina of Time. But that game is actually chock full of Easter egg references to this game, in that a grand majority of very story critical NPCs are named after the different towns you come across in Zelda II.
Oh, interesting. But at the same time, I know that's not a sequel to this game.
No, it's technically a prequel.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess these towns are named after those characters, not the other way around.
I guess you would go back to see it that way. And, you know, that's kind of how I experienced it, because I played Ocarina of Time first and then went back to Zelda 2, and you go into the first town, it's like, hey, welcome to Roru. I was like, oh, that's the Sage of Light. But obviously the town was there first in our world's chronology, but not in Hylian chronology, which is just wonky.
It is
Interesting.
very. Also, can I point out one thing about the timeline to you, Dalton, or do you want not want anything known about it?
I mean, I'm aware of some things. I'm aware that this is the only direct sequel to the original. I'm aware that there's like a split or two in the timeline based on some of the games having time travel. And I'm aware that supposedly, somehow, Breath of the Wild, which I think is the only main title that's come out since the official timeline, I'm aware that supposedly it takes place in a future that happens after any of these timelines. It is simultaneously a sequel to all of them. Like, basically any of these scenarios will lead to Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, because
So that's what I know.
I think any of the scenarios, there's really only one game that it really starts with as far as the timeline goes, and that's Ocarina of Time, because that's the only one that really does time travel. But that's getting a little off topic here. We'll talk about Ocarina when we get there, when we spotlight it.
Everyone always sleeps on Oracle of Ages.
Everyone sleeps on Link's Awakening, dude.
I was just saying there are 2 time travel games, but Oracle doesn't
that's
cause
right.
the timeline to split.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, geez. All right. Let's talk music.
So we had a massive bomb dropped before we started recording.
Yeah.
So we didn't know until about 10 seconds before I opened up the Wikipedia page and hit record that Koji Kondo didn't do this game.
I will try and reenact my reaction.
Yeah. Okay. We'll recreate it. All right, guys. I'm about ready to go. I'm gonna open up the Wikipedia page real quick, just in case it ends up being helpful. Holy shit! Koji Kondo didn't do this.
What?
Oh no! What? How could you do this?
That is not how you reacted.
No, it's not. I was more like, what the fuck? Like, what?
So I actually was very surprised when you originally said this, but having had some time to think about it since then, actually doesn't surprise me all that much, because the music is not really similar besides your general overworld theme. It's really not that similar to other games.
It's different enough that I'm not surprised, but it wasn't different enough for me to pick up on it myself playing.
Yeah. I could have seen this as like Kondo having a hard time trying to figure out what he wanted to go in direction, but like I wouldn't have known that this wasn't him if I didn't know it, like by looking up information.
Yeah, well, and like Kondo's two biggest things he's known for, Mario and Zelda,
right,
are both two distinct styles from each other. It's not like he has one style, but he has one Zelda style. But with this being the second entry, there's not really a style yet if there's only been one game that only had two songs in it.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be weird to me if he wrote this, even though it is different.
Yeah, absolutely.
That said, I was surprised, like, knowing that this game doesn't have a real great reputation. I was surprised by how much music I already knew from it, probably because of Smash.
Oh yeah, the Palace Dungeon theme is, of course, like the theme on Hyrule Temple, which is probably how everybody knows it from. It was really cool to see that came from this game.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess Smash is old enough that when the series started, there weren't that many Zelda games to choose from. Mm-hmm. So I guess in that sense, it's not that weird that they would go here. But then at least that song stayed as staple, and I mean that's the most important song of the game, but the game's like, it's consistently good. Yeah,
it's not to say that I was disappointed by this soundtrack or anything. It holds up really well. It does fit the aesthetic of the game, I think.
And I mean, it, in a sense, I think it's better than the first game's soundtrack, if only because it has more than two songs.
Yeah, I'll give it that. I do have to say, though, with this one kind of being like the black sheep of the family, I'm almost wondering if it's the music that could also tell you it was offset. You know what I mean? Like there's not that certain wonder and mystery behind it as much as it is like the music kind of is like, okay, we have an objective, go to it, Yeah,
I guess it does kind of have more of a hack and slash adventure type feel to the soundtrack, which is fitting with the way the game is, but not necessarily with the Zelda franchise as a whole.
Yeah, the soundtrack feels more confident and direct and leading versus the other one where it was kind of full of wonderment and like, I don't know, it kind of felt like the music in there kind of invoked that curiosity for me.
Sure.
In the first game, you know what I mean? And without getting like super, musically nerdy or anything, it's I mean, intervals count specifically. Like, there's a lot of different neat nuances that the first game did that the second game didn't in its soundtrack.
Sure. Yeah, I get that. And so it's occurring to me now that it's kind of rude that we've been talking about the music for maybe 3 minutes and I haven't actually said the composer's name.
Oh, yeah.
So this composer is Akito Nakatsuka. He worked with Koji Kondo on the first game he did, which was Devil World. Past that, his most notable works that I recognize here would be Clu Clu Land, Excite Bike, Ice Climber, Punch Out. Those are the big ones jumping out at me. It has him listed as a...
He's actually on some pretty big name games back then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although those big name most important things are mostly from the 80s, and then I just kind of jump forward, nothing too significant there. And then it has him listed as a supervisor on Smash 4, but I have a feeling they listed a ton of people as a supervisor on Smash 4, so I don't know how significant that really is.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that would be a credit because, like, hey, we're going to use your music that you did probably in this game, so we want you in on it.
Yeah, I wonder
I'm
if
sure
it's
that's
something more like
what
that.
it was for.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just off his Wikipedia page there. So I think we should make a habit of pointing out the composers like that because we can't only talk about Koji Kondo.
Right.
Man, how did we get through 2 Sonic games without mentioning any composers' names except for Michael Jackson, and we didn't even get to those games yet?
I was going to say, I definitely talked about Michael Jackson.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Oh, boy.
Man, what was it with the NES era and developers were just like across the board, across every franchise, just took massive risks in like for the second entry in their franchise. It was always so much different than the first. You know, we have Zelda 2, we had American Mario Brothers 2, Final Fantasy 2 was really different compared to the first. So was the second Fire Emblem. We had Castlevania 2, which was crazy different compared to the first.
Oh, yeah.
Developers were a lot more willing.
That's
to take
another one where I
risks
played.
back then, don't you think?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Castlevania is another one where I played and loved the first one and then started the second one and went, oh, shit, I don't want to do this. It's so different. I don't like it immediately.
I actually wanted to go back and mention Castlevania when we were talking about the combat system in this game, because I felt that the wind-up that Link has when you attack, you know, the way he kind of takes a couple frames to lean back with his sword before striking, it actually reminded me a lot of using the whip in Castlevania, just, you know, with a much shorter range. And once I thought of it that way, and that you had to be a lot more methodical with your strikes, the combat system started to click a lot more for me when I was playing this game.
Man, I forgot, but intended to mention that the side-scrolling stuff reminded me of playing Castlevania.
Oh, absolutely.
I think the level design in Castlevania is more fair, but I think the controls feel better here. This feels like a better controlling
I'm going to
Castlevania.
disagree with you on that.
I mean, in that
Level
the
designs
movement
look really good, but some of the shit in the format, like platforming, was garbage.
in this game,
No, in Castlevania, some of it was really not good.
I guess Castlevania usually feels fair to me, except the worst possible thing this one could have in common: the fucking knockback that can knock you down the pits.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
I honestly think that Zelda, that Link, just kill me now. I think that Link and Simon have the same kind of like flinching, knocked up recoil animation from getting hit by enemies, and just like in Castlevania, you get the bullshit of getting hit by a rock on the edge of a cliff and falling off of it to lose an entire life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's bubbles. The enemies almost never knocked me off. It was bubbles. Why?
Are you
Why is
talking
the hero of
Castlevania?
This game
Hyrule?
did come
No,
out.
I'm
I
talking
just
this
looked up.
one.
This game did come out. Oh, actually, only about 4 months after Castlevania. So I was wondering if they had maybe taken any inspiration from the game, and they may have, because I'm pretty sure development time was a lot shorter back in those days. But
Possibly.
Mega Man every year.
Yeah.
what a time to be alive. Born in the wrong generation, am I right, boys?
I was definitely meant for the 1540s. Sound pretty good. Feels about right. Do we have anything else to add before we try to rank it?
Only other thing I think is worth noting is that we've talked about a lot of things from the Zelda franchise that originated in this game, but the one thing that we haven't talked about yet, a pretty popular recurring boss throughout the rest of the franchise, is in fact the final boss in this game, and that's Dark Link.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that did surprise me.
This is, I think, the only Zelda game where you don't fight either Ganon or the Ganon stand-in of the week at the end of the adventure. You fight yourself, because Ganon's already
Did you
dead.
know that Dark Link was in this game before this week?
Oh, yeah.
I did, only because I think I had seen it on a Zelda trivia video on YouTube.
Okay, I actually barely know what Dark Link is because I might only know that Dark Link exists because of Smash.
Think Peter Pan and his shadow.
I mean, it's a trope that you can see in a lot of movies and games and whatnot. So I don't know if Zelda does anything different with the idea.
No, it really doesn't.
For some reason, what's coming offhand to me is Devil May Cry and Scott Pilgrim.
It's pretty much exactly like that. I think the Dark Link fights are always just really popular because they're really cool. And the one from Ocarina of Time, which I imagine is many gamers' first Dark Link fight, well, that's one of the coolest fights in the entire game. It's really cinematic. There's a really cool moment that I won't spoil until you get there yourself.
All right, good stuff. Boy, are we ready to rank this?
Oof.
I'm ready.
I suppose.
Josh, go first.
I never thought that I would be saying this, but I actually am going to rank this above Zelda 1.
Oh, man. I think I agree, but I needed you to say it first.
I feel like I need to chop off my tongue for the sacrilege that just has passed my lips. But really, I just think maybe it's because this game is so unique in the franchise and Zelda 1 has been iterated on and improved upon so many times that going back to it now, it feels kind of bare bones compared to the rest of the franchise. But there was a lot to be frustrated with about this game and a lot to dislike about it, but there was a lot to like about it too. And I don't know, the uniqueness of it now, I think puts it above the first for me.
Yeah, I do have to say the same. Whereas there was a lot of excitement and wonderment inside of the first game where it was very sandboxing. You could kind of take it in your own way and interpret things in your own way as well. This game kind of had a good definitive narration as opposed to the first game. There was a lot more, I don't want to say hand-holding, but there was a little more advice that was worth it instead of just random text that you could find at any time or any point in the game.
Yeah, without retreading too much, it just feels like the game has a clearer suggestion of what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Instead of, you're less likely to end up in like a palace that you're not actually able to do yet.
Right.
But
this
the first game,
has
like,
more direction.
The first game didn't stop you from trying to do something there was no way you were actually going to be able to do.
Right.
And the hints were useless most of the time. And I think this game did that better. And I think it did having an alive world better. And I think the combat system feels really good, even though like the enemies are kind of crap. Like your controls are good, but the enemies aren't really fair.
Yeah.
Both of these games are hard enough that I end up cheating to some extent anyway, so what's it really matter?
I gotta say, guys, I really feel like with a handful of quality of life adjustments, this game would have been remembered just so much more fondly than it was. It's just almost there, right? Like if you could restart at the start of a dungeon if you got a game over in the middle of it and there were some heart drops from enemies, I honestly think that a lot more people would fondly remember this game, and there may even have been more sequels in that vein.
Yeah.
Well, and with my modern convenience of save states and easy to access Game Genie codes and internet walkthroughs and everything. So, you know, with all that changing the modern day experience, the only thing I can really think that the first game does better is graphics, to be honest.
Okay, yeah.
I can't really think of anywhere else where the first game wins, unless you're someone that really appreciated the need to draw a map and map out a dungeon and whatnot. You're not going to have that experience here. I did the whole thing without using maps, so...
I'd have to say the first game beats it as far as music and graphics, though. Mm-hmm. Because when you think Zelda, what's the first song that comes into mind?
Fair enough. The theme song we've still been using ever since, but... To me, that game is two really, really great songs, and then that's it, and then it's over. Like, maybe I'm making a quantity over maybe like a quantity over quality argument, and maybe that's not right, but it just feels like more work went into it here.
You gotta give Zelda
I'm not
1 the
saying
edge
that,
for
but
puzzles, though. Zelda 2 does really not have much in the way of puzzles in its dungeons. They're pretty much just exploration and combat.
Sure.
So, you know, if that was the aspect of Zelda 1 that really appealed to you, then you're gonna not enjoy the lack thereof in Zelda 2.
Sure. All right. So all that being the case, I guess I'm giving this game the slight win. It's not a big win.
No. Yeah, it's really tiny.
Because it's still flawed, and this game is still going to get surpassed over and over again, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But I gotta say, before we started preparing for this episode, I did not think I was going to put it above Zelda 1. So,
Yeah.
listeners, if you're surprised, I'm just as surprised as you are.
Josh has become error.
I am error. We are all
He
error
is
on
error.
this blessed day.
On this blessed day.
Fuck you
Josh,
guys,
what
I'm-
Zelda game comes
I'm
next?
Bagu.
A Link to the Past comes next.
All right.
So
Oh, yeah.
Well.
that's a big one.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys there. I'm not going to promise that it's the next one because we've honestly discussed spotlighting everything under the sun. So
Yeah. Come back next time when we can heal your wounds.
Follow me into my
All right.
house and I'll do it for free.
Exactly.
All right,
Take
guys.
care.
We'll see you next time.